laws like Tada, Pota, Makoka and Gujkoka, what have you? Where do we draw the line? Is there a need for a tougher anti-terror law? And why don't you agree with it? What specifically? Is it the confession? Is it the wiretapping?
No.
Is it the admissible evidence in court? What exactly is it?
Yes. No. Yes. My opposition to this law is with regard to section 14, which gives power to any police officer, any police, to intercept without any permission from anyone else. Now this is, in my view, completely unconstitutional, because a telephone is now an integral part of anybody's personality, and we'll turn ourselves into a police state if we give power to the police to intercept. That means he can enter my mind, he can enter my pocket all the time. I have no freedom left. We won't be able to call ourselves a free country, and there is no extraordinary situation which would warrant this kind of a law.
What about
if we were at war with someone, if there was an internal insurgency in a particular area?
No, Mr. Tulsi, let me ask Professor Nalpat, of course, about what about external threats?
We can't allow the police to get into our telephones.
No, two ministers, this argument, Professor Nalpat, about perhaps overreach and intruding upon personal lives of private citizens, what weighs heavier right now? I mean, on the minds of people who run the country, where do you say national security ends and rights start? That's a very thin line, really. But one has to be calibrated when you're approaching this, because it's a very sensitive subject, as has been described by Mr. Jaitley and Mr. Rudy.
Well, Athar, I'd like to say that from the point of view of national security, there is really need, in my view, for a national law on terrorism, because terror is not something that is state related. Terror is not specific to one state, nor are there terrorist groups operating in India that are really state specific. They operate across the country. So there is need for a national law. But my point is that this law has to be very clearly restricted to acts of terrorism.
But how does one make sure that happens? Because past experience would say it's always viable to loopholes.
Well, if we're going back to Gujarat, for example, there was a chief minister called Chivanbhai Patel, and I well remember that several people were used to claim that Mr. Patel used to arrest people. The same thing happened in Maharashtra.
Under these laws meant for something
many
else.
Politicians arrested dozens of people, and quite frankly, they, in a sense, blackmailed them, and they got released only after the blackmail was paid. This happened in both Maharashtra and Gujarat. So it's very important to ensure that the provisions of the law are such that only affect terror. And secondly, any misuse of the law should lead to draconian action on the part of the policeman who is misusing the law.
Is that possible though, Jaiveer Shergill? Is that possible at all with a law like this, which has provisions like, and let me tell you what the provisions are: confessions before police officers, first confessions are admissible in court, extension of the period of investigation up to 180 days, evidence collected through interception. This is important. Interception of wire, electronic or oral communication will be admissible in court. The devil, Jaiveer, is in the details, and you'd agree with me there.
Athar, absolutely, and let's be very clear, subject to what Mr. Tulsi says and Mr. Salve say, there is a law in this country which deals with terrorist activities. There is an act called the Unlawful Activity Prevention Act. Entire 20 sections are dedicated to it. It deals with terrorist organizations. It gives a schedule of terrorist organization, terrorist acts. It deals with the bail, like this is sought. It deals with evidence through interception by a competent authority. So there is a complete code with safeguards which are not there in the Gujarat bill. Gujarat bill is basically a license to snoop, license to arrest under a valid law which the Gujarat government wants to do. I haven't heard any of the
political argument, sir. Mr.
BJP
Vyas, come in here.
No,
that's
legal,
a political argument you're giving, sir. You are giving up, and this is what I'm going to ask Mr. Salve also. Your line is political. The problem perhaps is jurisprudence. I'm coming to you, Mr. Shergill. Can we have Mr. Shergill and Mr. Vyas now? Mr. Vyas, this is a political argument.
Just give me 10 seconds. Can Mr. Vyas point out what is the deficiency in the central law, Unlawful Activity Prevention Act, which does not deal with Gujarat? Please highlight the problems.
Okay, Mr. Vyas, is the Congress's opposition merely rhetorical and based in political motive? Yes.
Absolutely rhetorical, because if at all in Gujarat, if somebody has misused the POTA or even the prevention of black PBM, prevention of black marketing act, it was rampantly misused by Congress. They have got no business to talk on this. The minister, which was chief minister, whose name was mentioned by Professor Nalpat, again belonged to them, and that is what he is infamous for. So I think let us understand that, you know, you are talking about Indian Post and Telegraph Act 1885. Now, the technology, if you refer to the technological developments, as Alvin Toffler has said, that technology will invade every walk of life. Those who adopt to it shall prosper, those who do not shall disappear like dinosaurs. So crime also is going to become highly technical, and technology has to be used to detect that. And to that extent, I think any means of communication, be it electronic or otherwise, has to be under surveillance and shall be under surveillance. If at all, when the terrorists are using the most sophisticated of the equipments to communicate with each other, I think Gujarat is, the Punjab's example was given, yes, it is a border state, but then you are forgetting that Gujarat has 1/3 of the coastline of the country.
Okay,
and that is really the point from
Mr.
where
Vyas,
twice
let me
the
get in a
terrorists
couple of
entered
other
and went
voices
to
here.
Bombay.
Jaiveer, I know you want to respond to this. Before I get Professor Nalpat in, just one question to Mr. Salve. Mr. Salve, let me ask you this. What about the government's argument? Because I haven't asked you this. Again, I go to the same point. Mr. Jaitley linking this to national security, national interest, and I'll refer you to Rudy's remark as well. He says, we don't want India to become an ISIS-like state. Now, personally, really, it's a bit of a stretch, but what are your thoughts?
Well, those are the arguments which have always been advanced for upholding the Prevention of Terrorism Act, and that was upheld by the Supreme Court.
Well, as one of the legal luminaries of the country, Mr. Salve, before I go to Mr. Nalpat, realistically, and this is a question that's coming from me, realistically, do you see this bill as trampling the rights of individuals, even in the chance they're actually guilty of committing a terror act? And I'm asking this objectively, not getting into the debate of do terrorists deserve rights. I'm not even touching that with a barge pole. Let's restrict that to our objective opinion here.
See, I've had a serious issue with the provision always, not today, always had one very serious concerns with the provision which makes confessions to a policeman admissible. I mean, there was this story that there was a particular, maybe this story is completely fictional, but just to underscore the point, there was a story of a particular cop who used to say, this belt, I count this belt. So he used to say this belt is number 65, means this belt has extracted 65 confessions, you know. So confessions to the police, should they be admissible in evidence? That's a larger question. POTA made them admissible, MCOCA makes them admissible. Wiretapping, see, to wiretapping today, frankly, is a joke. The amount of wiretapping which goes on, I have filed this petition for Mr. Ratan Tata where the figures have come. Tata Tele alone gets, and it's not that large a service provider as Airtel and Vodafone, which are much, I believe, far more bigger consumer base. Tata Tele said in 1 year, they get 10 to 12,000 requests for wiretap from the government. So wiretap in India is become a joke. But having said so,
there's some problem with the audio, so I will come back to you. Professor Nalpat, those are concerns flagged by Mr. Salve himself as well. Do you think those concerns aren't being addressed in the current form? Because ultimately, we are also talking about these particular points which are the bone of contention. Otherwise, nobody's arguing the need for tougher anti-terror laws.
Yeah, Athar, I simply want to point out that we have on the statute books for decades laws that are even more draconian than this particular law. For example, this narcotics and psychotropic drugs law, which is there in force. It's a draconian law which does not belong to any democratic country. Now, supposing somebody smuggles some kind of drug into your house or my house, and then the police come in and they're tipped off by the gangster who did the smuggling, I can tell you we'll be in jail for a very long time, as Mr. Salve can tell you, because the safeguards to the victim, if I may say so, that kind of a sting, are almost zero in that law. So Mr. Shergill needs to really understand there are plenty of existing laws in the country that are even more draconian than this Gujarat law, and start talking of repealing those laws. Now, I want to point out one more fact. I quite agree with Mr. Salve about the police. You remember about 20 years ago, there was a cryogenic engine, a huge thing about cryogenic engines and scientists, and many scientists were tortured into making confessions. Now we know that some external agencies manipulated that in order to block the Indian cryogenic engine program. So we need a special group of police who are trained only in counter-terror operations, and only this special group should handle this kind of case and should have this kind of power.
But in that case, where does the Gujarat anti-terror bill will lay then? If we need an organization like this, can the state police really handle more tougher laws? Like
Atar, I haven't really read that particular law, but I'd like to make one point. The only safeguard will be, frankly, public opinion. And here, for example, I was very disappointed that the existing government that is here today allowed 66A to continue, and in fact defended 66A, because you need freedom of speech, you need freedom of the internet, and these freedoms are essential to prevent misuse of law.
Jaiveer, you want to come in here? I mean, you're still maintaining this is an ominous legislation. Your party's stance, of course, is as if tomorrow we're going to become a police state. Is there really a danger of that? Because governments like Karnataka, which is ruled by the Congress party, are very similar provisions. I have all the details here. Do you want me to go into it or not?
No, Atar, I'll make just 2 points to Mr. Nalpat and the spokesperson from the BJP. Each draconian law has left a cautionary tale. More of a reason we don't have another. Second, in this case, the God is also in the detail. Please, I am urging Mr. Vyas and Mr. Nalpat to give me one reason, they're beating around the mulberry bush, why the Unlawful Activity Prevention Act dealing with terrorists is not sufficient to deal with Gujarat when it is dealing with the entire India. I haven't heard that answer. Please enlighten me how this law is deficient, has loopholes, or is the reason there are activities going on in Gujarat which this law cannot deal with. I haven't heard any logical answer from either of them.
Okay,
so
Mr. Nalpat will answer you. Then Mr. Vyas. Professor Nalpat, here's your chance, then we go to Mr. Vyas.
I want to repeat what I said, that there is need for a national law that encompasses the entire state, and in fact encompasses the entire globe.
I'm telling you about.
No, but that particular national law is not enough. There needs to be a good national law in the whole situation, and until that law is there, individual states will start going in with their own laws.
No, if you heard that answer,
have you read that law, Mr. Nalpat?
I'm sorry?
Have you read that law?
The Gujarat law, I have not read it.
How does it deal with bail? How does it deal with charge sheet? How does it deal with evidence through interception as communication?
No, I've already flagged that off, and that is one of the concerns, no doubt, Jaiveer, and you'll be kind enough to acknowledge that I pointed that out. If I can do it again if you want me to. But Mr. Vyas, let's respond to that first. Jaiveer Shergill says there's no logical argument why Gujarat specifically would need a tougher law which can't handle. Yes.
I have very high regards for my friend Mr. Jaiveer Shergill. I only have a problem with his doublespeak. If this was the logic, why the government of the day at the center recommended it to the President of India to approve Karnataka and Maharashtra laws? Were they not as knowledgeable as Mr. Shergill is? If you were blinking at it, now you are trying to take the shelter under the same. How far it is logical? And I do agree with Professor Nalpat that there is a need for a wider debate. I fully appreciate also the views expressed by both the learned lawyers, Mr. Tulsi and Mr. Harish Salve, that there is a need for a larger debate, and we must ensure that while we do not want to sacrifice the personal safety and the human rights, we also should not.
Let's get Jaiveer's answer to that before I go to Mr. Salve and Mr. Tulsi. Let's get Jaiveer's quick answer on that before I go to Mr. Salve and Mr. Tulsi. Respond to that.
Quick answer. No matter how attractive Congress's hypocrisy argument sounds, Makoka, Karnataka, please, in law, application of one law in state cannot be a rationale of its application to another state. Each state has to justify its own ground for applicability of that law.
Okay, let me ask you a counter question then. No, hold on. Jaiveer, can I ask you a counter question before I move on to Mr. Nalpat and others? The point here is you're saying that, are you admitting, first of all, let me ask you this very directly and bluntly, are you admitting that previous laws passed by the Congress governments, including Tada, including Makoka, perhaps didn't really help, and ultimately that is why they were struck down by the legal system in the country? If you admit that, then I'll give you the locus standi to criticize this particular bill. Otherwise, you have none.
Firstly, factually, as Mr. Tulsi told you, neither Tada was struck down by Supreme Court, neither was Pota. Pota was repealed by UPA. Tada lapsed in its natural time.
No, but the Supreme Court intervened in the last era bill.
When Makoka was passed, it was the NDA central government
approved
Supreme
Court upheld it.
When it rejected it. I'm saying upheld it. I'm saying Supreme Court upheld it.
Okay.
Supreme Court upheld Tada, Supreme Court upheld Pota, Supreme Court held in Makoka. I am saying that. The question is not on competence. Question of rationale and requirement of Gujarat to have this law today. The
Okay, then let me ask you,
Karnataka has it.
Professor
Jaiveer, then what is your problem with Gujarat?
That's what I'm coming to.
Jaiveer,
Then what exactly
Jaiveer,
is
if
the
you are so
problem
kind
with
to all
the
these
Gujarat
states,
bill?
what is your problem with
My
Gujarat?
problem, Mr. Vyas, with Gujarat is this. My problem is this. Are you telling me Gujarat is facing the same situation as Punjab did? As Maharashtra did in 1999?
That's the crux of the argument.
Are you
Hold on.
telling
That's
me
the crux of the argument the Congress is
Unlawful Act
making.
was not there?
Let me come in here. Let Mr.
My
Vyas
dear
come in a
friend,
bit. Mr. Vyas.
My dear friend, in that case you are forgetting, just a minute, Athar. In that case you are forgetting that almost all the 3 attacks on Mumbai, the landing point was Gujarat, or one way or the other Gujarat was involved in getting the people in. So Gujarat, if you...
Why did not Mr. Vajpayee listen to this argument?
Please,
Why did the two presidents not listen?
expose-
Why are you not adhering to the president's advice? At least give the benefit of doubt of judgment.
No, there
to
was
your
a
own
reason.
Prime Minister
I
and
already
presidents.
explained. Why did Mr. Vajpayee's government and then your next
Mr.
government,
Abdul Kalam,
your
Ms.
UPA government
Pratibha
did not
Patil,
listen to
Mr.
it
Abdul
because they
Kalam,
were
Ms. Pratibha
biased
Patil.
towards Narendra Modi.
Okay, you know.
I will tell you 3 specific reasons, Mr. Vyas.
That is what
the
I'm
3
telling,
reasons
Jaiveer,
were.
that
in
And
the
two of
advice
them are precedents.
Clause
Is that
16
it? 3 specific
of
reasons, 2 of them are
the word
precedents.
shall should be replaced
Were
with the word
blocked
may.
by Maharashtra High Court.
Athar, allow me to 10 seconds.
Yes.
I have the advice of the president in front of me. 3 advices were: do away with the confession. Second, replace the word shall with may when it released to detention of 180 days. Third, the bail should be given after hearing the public prosecutor. Everything has been given a wish wash away on the advice of